Hi everyone, welcome. God, I sound very loud on this. The way we're just going to kick this off is so that we can place some context into who I am and why I'm so passionate about the cause we're all here to support today. This is just a little video of me winning Ironman UK.
Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen, to go on?
Start with the reason I put that up is because I just wanted to let you all know that sometimes your body and mind is capable of a lot more than you ever think is possible. And my talk today goes a little bit into my journey and looking at how we should be shifting our perspectives in mental health and what I've learned along the way. So I split my time between NHS practice, working as a psychiatrist, 2.5 days a week, and also running a company called Curious 7, which is essentially an integrative health platform which looks at prevention and optimal health. And I use a range of functional medicine testing through that. So a little bit about my journey, as you've already seen. At that finish line, I was overwhelmed by so many emotions. It was the first time I'd ever done an Ironman. I'd never even run a marathon, let alone run a marathon after swimming 2.4 miles, biking 112. So getting to that finish line it was pretty incredible for me. It's difficult for me to say this, but standing here today, but half my life almost, I was medicated with some form of antidepressant. Now, the reasons for that are multifactorial. Started when I was around 14 or 15, when the GP said to me that I had depression, that I had some degree of eating disorder, and that, my family had the measles, yet I was just showing the spots. And I thought that was incredibly poignant. Didn't quite get it at the time, but instead of treating the family, they treated what they could see, and they threw a Prozac at me for a long time. And actually, I think it probably did more harm than good, but it's taken me a long time to realize the reasons why. So on top of that, I suffered a severe head injury following a ski accident in 2004 in my final year of medical school, which caused a lot of sort of ongoing problems that no one really knew how to fix. My MRI scan had come back normal, but I'd spent 2 days in a coma. I had extensive posturing. They rang my parents and said that I might not make it through the night, but I did, and I was put on anti-epileptics for a significant period of time, but I came through. However, I did not function well at all for around 5 years, but no one could really understand why. No one looked at my diet, no one asked how my lifestyle was. They just put me on increasingly escalating doses of antidepressants and sleeping tablets because I wasn't sleeping properly. And I just felt absolutely awful. What I'm saying here is for me at that time, conventional medicine really failed me. I remember going through my house officer years just completely flawed. I used to look at the patients in their beds and think like, God, I just want to get in bed and be a patient. And I was 25 and already planning my retirement. This is not how you want to feel. You want to feel full of life, full of vigor, but no one could tell me why. I didn't know why I was depressed. I didn't know why I had brain fog and couldn't concentrate and was just literally trawling through mud most of the time. So this is kind of what my diet used to look like at medical school, and I know a lot of young people in their 20s, wine is prominent because as is all alcohol with many medical students. It's not exactly what you want to be doing when you're recovering from head injury, but again, never really got that advice. Hefty amount of caffeine, lots of refined carbohydrate in the form of sugary yogurts, topped off by a couple of bagels a day, if not more, and a hefty amount of Diet Coke, which we all know has its own problems. So how did I change things around? I kind of tried to embody this concept of feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I I think, around 5 different triathlons before I actually got to the start line and thought, right, today I'm actually going to do this. I remember watching an ex-boyfriend at the time get through a triathlon thinking, wow, how do they actually keep going that long? You know, I mean, I just never thought it would be something that I could do. I have to put this in the context of my dad was a professional athlete. He was a cyclist back in the days of some famous, a chap that died on the Ventoux, Tom Simpson, if any of you know that story. So I do have a sort of genetic, not a gift is too strong a word, but you know, predisposition to endurance activity. So I got myself exercising. This was really difficult. I literally had to force myself out of my comfort zone. I ran 10 minutes down the road and I gradually built it up from that. And the feedback, as we all know, and I'll discuss a bit further, once you start exercising, you get a lot of positive feedback, you feel better, and we now know that it actually helps heal brains by a variety of mechanisms, which I will discuss later. So I also changed up my nutrition, which I'll talk about a little bit more now. I was that fat phobic, as we all were, at some point, just because we were told, you know, eat margarine and eat low-fat this and low-fat that. And, you know, my breakfast was, as I said, Special K and skim milk and orange juice. And I wondered why I was starving half the morning and didn't feel good. So adding in more fat for me was key. Also addressing a very, I know Rangan touched on this earlier, sort of leaky gut issues. Rangan said gut permeability, but essentially in the lay press, it's known as leaky gut. I actually tested positive for celiac antibodies. So my GP kind of said, well, maybe you have celiac disease. I'm like, well, how could I have celiac disease? Like, it's, you know, it just doesn't seem right. And then I started to change my diet. I reduced some of the cereal I ate and the bread, and my gluten antibodies went away. There was a bit more to it than that. I addressed other issues as well, including, you know, looking at my stress, looking at my sleep. So I became big into this whole area of what we call self-quantification and testing. And I'd had blood tests in my GP, and largely they all came back as normal, and they couldn't really figure out what was going on with me until my thyroid started going off. So I started developing an underactive thyroid. But they didn't want to medicate me because they said, well, let's just keep repeating it. And I'm like, I feel terrible, please do something. So eventually they put me on thyroxine, and it was like a light came on. You know, I think personally we should have a lower threshold for prescribing thyroid medications in people that have depression or mental health problems, because I see big effects. Or we should look at supporting them through a nutritional perspective to change how their thyroid functions. So for me, I had low iron, low magnesium levels, high cortisol, which is probably made worse by the fact that I was training as an elite athlete, you know, bang, 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 chronic cardio all the time, competing around the world. I was on the contraceptive pill, as a lot of people are, for a number of reasons. And in case I forget to touch on this later, the contraceptive pill in mental health is potentially a big issue, especially with the progesterone-only contraceptive. I spend a lot of time asking my female patients in NHS psychiatry, are you on the progesterone-only pill? And a lot of them say yes, or implant, or injection. And once they come off that, or try something else, then often a lot of their mood symptoms, or the fluctuation of their mood symptoms, improves vastly. But a lot of them have never been asked by a psychiatrist before, or even addressed the fact that they had a comorbid diagnosis of depression or bipolar, and to question why they're on a progesterone-only pill. So the pill as well, there's evidence now that it affects our microbiome, our gut health. It also reduces our free B vitamins, which are necessary for energy metabolism and vitality. And it also reduced our level of free testosterone, which for me was very important as an athlete. I essentially had no free testosterone running around, which is necessary for function and recovery and muscle strength. So for me, stopping the pill, improving my B vitamin status, increasing my iron levels, and this is not just, you know, this is not getting your ferritin to 15. Ferritin is an iron storage protein, sorry. This is getting your ferritin levels to a more optimum level, around 50. So I started to develop this way of thinking more about optimal health. And why should we be just saying, why should we be looking at health in absence of disease when we should be looking at health as more health optimization? I've mentioned something very briefly there about nutrigenomics, which I'll touch on again towards the end, because for me it was very important. I did something like the 23andMe test. Has anyone heard of that? Which is basically consumer DNA testing. It costs around 100 quid. You spit in a pot. It gives you a readout of your genetic data. And for me, that showed me I had this genetic mutation called MTFR, and that means I'm more prone to depression, anxiety, mood fluctuations. And if I upped my intake of methylated B vitamins, that's not standard B vitamins, methylated B vitamins, I would improve. And I did. And it was marked, incredibly marked. I've put learned resilience, and I know Dave Unwin talked about this a bit. One of the things that being a professional athlete taught me was a lot about resilience. So this is what my diet looks a bit more like now, and I think this looks very much what we ate for lunch, doesn't it? Big fan of beetroot, all the healthy fats. I do well with dairy, some people don't. I generally follow high fat, low carb, although I do carb cycle a bit because my thyroid problem. I think people and women in general can get into a few issues when they're too low carb, especially their thyroid seems to, in my experience of testing a lot of people, with women tend to, if too low on carbohydrate over a long, prolonged period of time, can run into problems with thyroid, which can then conversely cause them to store fat. So I think that sometimes we need to think a little bit about that in a more personalized approach when prescribing high fat, low carb. So I have lots of very bright foods. I think that's incredibly important. I think variety is something that we haven't really touched on today. Variety of foods is so incredibly important because it feeds and nourishes our gut microbiome. I think one problem that we get into when we prescribe high fat, low carb is that people reduce their fiber intake, especially if they're going ketogenic. But we really need to encourage to have, significant fiber in the diet to improve the billions of bacteria we have in our gut, which are responsible for regulating our metabolism, our mood, and our energy. So a little bit about mental health, stepping away from me, and why I look at things a little bit differently. This is just some figures for you. 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience a health problem in any given year. That's huge. I mean, I'm sure every one of you here knows someone that has had some kind of mental health problem. 1 million a week, approximately, is spent by the NHS on antidepressants. Do they work? I mean, NICE guidelines now tell us that we shouldn't be giving antidepressants to mild and moderate depression, which is the vast majority of depression. I work in secondary care and psychiatry, so by the time people get to me, they've already been through 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 antidepressants, and they're still depressed. So the GP sends them to us and says, well, what do we do next? And so I'm told to put them on another antidepressant or up the dose or add in lithium or maybe add in an antipsychotic to help them sleep, because if they sleep, they'll be less anxious. They're less anxious, they're less depressed. So I look at things a little bit differently in the way I approach my clients. This is the way we're told to approach things. And we do, to some extent, the biopsychosocial model. So there's no one here that mentions nutrition. There's a little bit at the top that says physical health. But when I see patients, I'm asking them, what do you eat? How do you sleep? What's your circadian rhythm like? I don't say that, but I say, do you wake up at the same time? Do you go to bed at the same time? Are you looking at your phone or your computer till 11 o'clock at night, or the TV? All that blue light at night suppresses your natural melatonin production. If you don't get deep sleep, then you don't repair the brain. The brain effectively cleans itself at night. By cleaning out the rubbish, it effectively resets itself. Over time, if it doesn't do this, then if you're perhaps a more susceptible individual, you're more likely to go along the path to depression, anxiety, or a variety of other mental health problems. So I always look at patients' blood test results. I check for things like B12 deficiency. I look at what I can do in the NHS. And then privately I do much more testing into looking at the reasons why people might be the way they are. But in the NHS, I'll look at a full blood count, I'll look at iron, I'll look at B12, I'll look at folate. I often look at cortisol. In women, I often look at hormone levels in their luteal phase to see if there's an estrogen dominance, because that can cause a lot of mood problems. I have a particular interest in postmenopausal and perimenopausal mental health, because I think the role of hormones is so important, and I've done a bit of work with bioidentical hormones in that sphere. And I think that if any of you are interested in that, there's a lot of work that's being done by Nick Panay and Professor John Studd on the role of hormones. We are our hormones. If there's one takeaway you can get from that, please, it's very important. And that's not just women. As men progress and they get older as well, testosterone levels decrease, and that can affect mood and general well-being. This is a very wonderful lady called Professor Julia Rutledge, who's a clinical psychologist in New Zealand, who's done widespread studies showing that micronutrients, if used in the right dose, for the right duration, and in the highest quality, can treat and prevent mental illness. She's just done a study in ADHD children, which was very compelling. This is a little bit of what we've looked at already. This is conventional. We all know we throw medication at things, we offer a bit of therapy, and then we look at the other things if they fail. It's not working. I know Rangan touched on this earlier because it's very important. In the medicine world, the Lancet is the bomb, the sugar daddy of medical journals. So to get nutritional medicine mentioned is a big thing. This is just a bit more about the studies. I don't know if, I just need to mention this one study because it was a sort of a landmark study, and I want to tell you how important. Basically, they took prisoners and they gave them a high-quality micronutrient supplement and essential fatty acids, so an omega-3, good quality, for 2 weeks. And the rates of violent offences in the prison went down by 26.3%. That was massive, 2 weeks. And yet, this was done in 2002, published in the British Journal of Psychiatry. Has it changed practice? No. Yet we know it works. And there's more studies along this. So we all know that the way we eat generally now is not good for us. This is just some of the reasons why. It's been touched on. A little bit about fats, particularly for mental health. Omega-3 is very important. We now have randomized controlled trials of omega-3 for mood disorders showing that they work. They often work better if they're used alongside a coexisting treatment. So you can't just withdraw people from their current treatment and stick them on omega-3s because the brain has already adapted to the drug they've been on. It needs to be done carefully. But there's a big study just published in the American Journal of Psychiatry showing that, quite astoundingly, that these different supplements here, used alongside current treatment, like an SSRI, like Prozac, for example, improve symptoms markedly, right? 2 minutes. If you need to take key nutrients away for mental and obviously physical health, omega fatty acids, yes, if you're going to eat high quality, not farmed fish, you can get enough if you eat twice a week. Otherwise, supplement with a high quality fish oil. Keep it in the fridge so it doesn't go rancid. B vitamins, really important. Look into methylation and methylfolate, methyl B12, because some people without that cannot tolerate normal B vitamins, in fact do worse. Amino acids, vitamin D we all know about. Haven't got time to go into the gut, but I've mentioned it extensively, and I know Rangan touched on it. Exercise, obviously I'm a big proponent of it. I've attached this picture here because it's from a triathlon in Thailand. This guy was absolutely huge, and yet he was going up this hill, you see, where other people were walking. And I applauded him, but it shows you a number of things. It shows you can't out-exercise a bad diet. But exercise works for a number of reasons. Improves endorphins. BDNF is a big one. BDNF is our brain chemical that stimulates new nerve cells to be grown, and it essentially helps our brain to sprout new neurons and improves not just well-being, but memory. It's anti-Alzheimer's, anti-dementia, anti-depression, and all those things. And that's essentially what this is saying. They've shown that intermittent fasting as well improves brain plasticity and health, we should be looking at brain health now, you know, in our 30s and our 40s, not when we've reached our 60s and we're starting to worry about dementia. I was going to just mention this quickly because Rangan did an interview in the BBC about this. Everyone got very excited. There's a new blood test which tells you whether or not you're going to respond to an antidepressant. Basically what it said was, if you have inflammation as measured by the blood test, then you're less likely to respond to an antidepressant than those who didn't have the inflammation. Now, the study authors said, well, then, therefore, we'll give them an anti-inflammatory. What I'm saying and what Rangan said was, why have they got inflammation? Let's just get back to the root. Let's start there and essentially go from there. Joanna Moncrief is a very outspoken psychiatrist who looks at the role of saying that we should change the whole way we approach pharmaceutical treatment of mental health. Right, so here's the future. You can only change what you can see. I'm a big advocate for showing people their data in a form they can understand, their blood tests over time, you know, their body metric data, and I know we touched on this earlier. I think it empowers patients if they know what they're changing. A little bit about education. This is what we're all aiming to do today, right? We're all aiming to get a clear public message across that, you know, we need to change the way we're looking at diet in the UK and treatment of our chronic health conditions. Thank you.
Bravo.